Sometimes it can be easier to work on a drawing if we change some of our layer settings. For instance, turning off unnecessary geometry or changing our layer colors can simplify what we see on screen and can make visually complicated drawings easier to understand. The nice thing is, when we finish our work, we can use AutoCAD's Layer Previous command to restore our layer states to their original settings. Let's take a look at Layer Previous. I'm going to come up and open a drawing. I'm going to click this icon. This will bring up my Select File dialog, and from here I'm going to go into my Chapter 10 folder, located inside the Exercise Files directory. We're going to come down and open up number 5, the Retro Controller drawing. Let me select this drawing and click Open. Now this is a very busy drawing. Let's make the assumption that I have to make some changes to this drawing, and the changes that I'm making don't involve the dimensions. I'm going to turn the dimensions layer off. So let me come up to the layer control, and I'll click. I'm going to come down to my dimensions layer, and I'll click the light bulb, and then I'll click in model space to clear the menu. You know what? I'm going to turn off every layer that I'm not going to be working on. Let me go back to the layer control, and I'll click. I'm not going to be working on my center lines layer. I'm not going to be working with the controller button layer, and I'm not going to be working with the orange markings layer. So let me turn all of those off, and I'll click outside the menu to close it. Now I'm sure you'll agree that the geometry we see on screen is much easier to look at. The one thing I want to point out is the geometry that we see on screen is actually 3 different layers. I've got one layer that represents my joystick, one layer that represents the rubber seal, and I've got another layer that represents the housing itself. Each one of those layers happens to be blue currently, and whenever we have multiple layers that are the same color, we run the risk of accidentally drafting on the wrong layer. So if I'm going to be doing some work on this drawing, I'm going to go through and make some color changes such that I can tell the difference between my layers. Now to do the color changes, I'm going to have to go to my Layer Properties Manager, so I'm going to click the icon. Let me widen up this column so we can see the names. My base layer, I'm going to set that to yellow. We'll click OK. The joystick layer, I will highlight that and we'll set that guy to magenta. I'll click OK, and we'll leave the rubber seal layer as blue. When I click OK, I can now see the difference between those 3 components. Perfect example. Right here, I've got some bad geometry. If I zoom in, I can see that I've got 2 fillets that happen to be on the wrong layer. Let's correct those guys. We'll click this fillet, and we'll click this one to highlight it. I can see that they were accidentally put on the controller base layer. Let me click the drop down, and I'm going to put these on the rubber seal layer. Let me click the layer name, and those guys are now on the correct layer. Let me hit escape, and we'll back up. Now these layer changes I've made are temporary. At some point after I'm done working, I'm going to need to put these layers back the way they were such that my drawing plots correctly. Well, I don't have to worry because I have a button right up here that AutoCAD gives me. That's the Layer Previous button. If I click this button one time, notice AutoCAD backs up through one previous layer state. I can click it again. It'll back up through the next one. I can click it again to go all the way back to where I started. Don't be afraid of changing your layer settings if it will make it easier for you to work on your drawing. Even if you make several adjustments, you can always restore your layer state by using AutoCAD's Layer Previous command.